Hi, I'm Bob Sweeney, and for another edition of the Juneau Garden. This will be the third program here in 2021, and like before, I'm going to take you on a tour around my different gardens here to see how things are progressing, or in some cases not progressing. We're going to start here behind my shed, where in the last program, if you watched it, you noticed that I planted these canna bulbs or canna roots that I saved over the winter in my basement as I dug them out last fall. So this is 1 month's growth. They're doing quite well. I probably need to water them more. They are a tropical plant and they need water. And it's been so dry this year, I should really get out here and water them a little bit more. I'll probably do that. Well, actually it's supposed to rain tomorrow, so maybe I'll see if it rains tomorrow. And if not, then I'll water them. All right, let's go check other things out now. Today is June 11th, and I thought I'd come out and shoot a video of my rose plants. These are the nicest they've looked in quite some time. Last year, all the roses except for this plant right here, bugs came in and ate up all the leaves. So whatever I did this year probably has made a difference because they look about as good as they ever have. This is a rose, I don't know any of the varieties, I'm sorry. But it's a real small bud and flower. So it's a little easier to grow than some of the fancier ones with the big blooms. This one usually blooms, but I've been having trouble getting it to grow up. But it's looking better this year than it has in a while. Panning out over to my right. Got another one here. That's didn't produce at all last year, any flowers at all last year because of the leaves being all eaten up. But then we have another one over here that always gets these really long stems, but I've never had any flowers on the end of the stem, so maybe this year it'll be different. I'm hoping so. So the roses are looking better this year. Around some of my ash trees I planted some small flower beds. These I believe are perennials. They come back every year, of course, if they're perennials. If there are some annuals in there, they reseed themselves here. It just makes it a little bit easier to mow around when we have a little bit larger area here to mow around. So I've got a flower bed here around this ash tree. And the flowers here are looking pretty good. And we have another ash tree flower bed here. You can see some flowers here are nicely in bloom. And right next to them here, you can see they're budding and getting ready to flower out. It's nice having flowers that will bloom at different times to keep some color in the garden. And here we have a flower bed underneath a maple tree. This maple tree creates a great deal of shade. So the plants in here struggle to really do quite well. I did plant a couple of hostas in here last year, and they should do better since they can handle shade better than some other plants. These other flowers that need more sunlight don't do very well, but again, it makes it easier for me to mow around. In the background here we have another larger maple. It's a silver maple that doesn't have quite so much shade, but around here I have nothing but hostas. So they can handle the shade better than some other plants. This is the area of my wildflower garden. I think I need to rejuvenate this bed next spring. Maybe I'll bring in some soil in the fall and get it prepared for a replanting. It doesn't look as good as it used to. In the background we have some goldenrod that of course will not become golden until August or September. On the left we have a great bunch of milkweed for the butterflies, the monarchs. I have not seen any monarchs yet this year. Last year we had 3 of them that were pretty regular around here, but I have not seen any yet this year. They're pretty aggressive at spreading, so I have to kind of keep an eye on how much they spread. But hopefully we'll get some butterflies here again this year. Today is Tuesday, June 1st. And take a look at the blackberries. They're in full bloom. I see I've got a number of pollinators flying around the blossoms. So hopefully we'll have a better crop this year than we had last year. But last year was the first year after transplanting them from a friend I square danced with. But they're loaded with flowers and I see pollinators. So maybe some good things are going to be happening this year. And this is what the blackberries look like now after that wonderful flowering we just saw. And we have quite a few berries here. Again, berries need lots of water for them to get big and plump. So I need to keep these watered better than what I have been doing. Next to the blackberries, I have a small bed of strawberries. When I purchased these from Jung's, I was under the impression that these were supposed to be ever-bearing. It turns out they're June-bearing. Even though I did water these, they did not produce very well. There's berries, but they're pretty small. And they're about done with now. Actually, there's some green ones in there, but they're small. Next to them here, we have a bed that has not done well in past years. I planted some peas in here real early in the season, but you can see here it's been essentially taken over by the raspberries that have spread from the bed next to it. And I'm going to allow this bed to become raspberries. These are a September bearing raspberry. You get a small crop here in June or July, and then more in September and October. Last year we had quite a few berries here in October that weren't ripe yet, and it froze. So that's kind of disappointing. But the berries are thick in here, the berry plants anyhow. In this bed here I have some lettuce. It's pretty bitter now, so it's probably done with. Behind them I have 2 small beds of garlic. The closer bed is garlic that I planted, that I purchased from Piggly Wiggly, and the one in the background is older. I planted, those were actual garlic bulbs that I purchased for planting, but they both seem to be doing okay. I think I'll be harvesting these here in July. This is a nectarine tree that I planted last year. I bought it at Jung's, but I planted it last year, so of course it didn't flower yet. It needs to be a little bit more mature before it's going to flower. But it's looking pretty good. It's growing well. I was pleased that it handled the winter as well as it did. Next to them we have some Manchurian apricots. We had 2 trees bloom this spring really early. And I think frost was a bit of a problem. That, and I don't think they pollinated very well because there weren't enough bugs out here to get at them. But there is 1 apricot on this particular tree. Hopefully it will mature. This is one of my peach trees. I have 2 of them, and they both flowered out really well this past spring, and they have a lot of peaches on them. I'll take you in to get you a closer look at them. Here we have a tiny peach, and if we move around we can find some more. A couple more down here. Looks like there's 3 of them there. Some more on this branch here. So I'm pretty pleased with the number of peaches we have. Hopefully they will mature really nice. And more up here. But as you can see, quite a few of them have fallen off. But that's common for a tree that has lots of fruit on it to get rid of some of them. And this tree as well has pretty good numbers of peaches. This particular tree is actually older than the other one. I'm not sure what the variety are, I've forgotten. But this one looks like it's doing pretty well. The peaches look a little bit larger, and it's got quite a few of them on there. We have two apple trees. This particular one is called Freedom. It produces some very nice fruit. And because it is disease resistant and fungus resistant, this is the tree that we get most of our apples from. I had to come in here and thin them out quite a bit because there were an awful lot of fruit on there, and I just end up getting lots of drops. And I just have to come out here and pick them up off the ground before they ripen, just get rid of them. It's a lot of work before I mow. So I thin them out, and hopefully they'll be bigger than they have been in past years. But last year we made a lot of applesauce from the apples from this tree. A lot of them, of course, were drops that we turned into applesauce. And of course we had some good ones for eating fresh. This is our Macintosh tree. I really trimmed it down this past fall. I couldn't reach the top layers of our branches with spray to try to keep some of the diseases out of it and the bugs out of it, so I really cut it down so I could reach it better with my spray. It did not flower very well this year. Maybe it was recovering from what it produced last year. But there's a few plants on here, and in the past few years it's really suffered from fungus, and I did not get any apples from this last year because they were all ruined by fungus. So I have to keep a real eye on this and make sure that I get some antifungal spray on here if I see it looking like it's becoming fungally. I have a small flower bed here where there used to be a fruit tree. I have a number of different types of flowers in here. You can see that some lilies are at the end here in the bottom left. And the big tall ones here are, what do I call those? The tall ones are lilies. They're a type of Asian lily. And they're about to bloom. I have a plum tree over here. And another one just like it. And the third one over here, finally flowered this year, and there's a few plums on it, but not very many. It's a real small tree. I'll get you a closer shot of it. This plum is a black ice. I bought this from Fleet Farm a number of years ago. Finally flowered this year. And there are a few plums on it for the first time. This one is necessary for cross-pollinating with the toka plums right next to it. The tokas right here flower out very, very early, and I always have problems with frost and freezing with them. But I think both trees have a few plums on them. But I never get very many because of freezing and the fact there just aren't any pollinators out at that time when it's so darn cold. Over here I have some Stanley plums. They flowered. I thought I was going to get some plums, but neither tree has much of anything. I do see one here on the older tree. But this tree is in the act of dying. But I thought I saw more of them on here earlier this spring, but there really isn't much here. We have two small cherry bushes that have been in here a number of years, and they produced last year. And this particular one's doing quite well, but I don't think there's any cherries on the other one. These are a semi-sweet. They're not a pie cherry. You know, you think you buy something like this that's supposed to be sweet, and they just don't match up to Bing cherries. But they're not too bad. This is a larger cherry tree that I planted last year. I got it from Jung's, and I wanted a dwarf plant, but they didn't have any. But the sales lady who worked in the bare root part of Jung's said that this one only gets about 20 feet tall, and it probably would be okay for us. It's had some problems getting going here, but it has fruit on it this year. This is a flower bed that is in my front yard or alongside the county highway. We had a bed here for quite some years. It's a real small one. You can see the lilies are in bloom now. And in the middle here, these are all planted last fall or late last summer. What I had is another bed up here, which I had peony in there and some continuous blooming lilies in here. They're doing quite well. And I joined those two beds with all these bulb plants here that I got from one of the persons that I square dance with. They haven't done anything this year, but I'm expecting better things next year. These are my young blueberry plants. I planted 4 of them a number of years ago up in my garden where the garlic is, but they all died. Don't know what happened. And my son suggested I plant them underneath my pine trees here alongside my driveway, figuring that the soil would be more acidic from the needles. You can see I've got a good bed of needles here that I swept up last year. Had terrible windstorms that blew huge numbers of dead needles off my neighbor's red pine. So I swept that over and over and over and over again to try and get them off of there and put them here around these berries. I have 10 plants. I planted 5 last year. I ordered 10, but they had run out of one of the varieties that I ordered, and I reordered this year. So I planted 5 more this year, so I have 10 plants in here. But they're young, so they aren't producing yet. The mulberries are ripe, and the birds know it. I actually picked at least 3 quarts of berries yesterday. Probably a little bit more than that. I almost filled a gallon ice cream pail full of them. So we'll be eating mulberries here a bit. I need to get back down here today, it looks like, and pick some more. This is a small tree here, and they all have been planted by the birds. Coming over here is my large mulberry trees. There's 2 of them right together. These originally were planted by the birds in my raspberries. So I dug them out of there and planted them here. Turns out that there were 2 of them growing right together. Every year the raccoons find it, and they get in here and they eat the berries off the ground, and they leave behind all kinds of fecal matter with lots of seeds in it. But I did get a number of berries from here yesterday. Actually, most of them came from this tree. Here we have our asparagus bed, and we can pick all the way to the end of June, but they got ahead of us. We went on vacation, a fishing vacation in northern Wisconsin for 6 days, and even though some had already begun to mature or flower out here, fern out here earlier, they have really all pretty much gone to ferns. I do get a few occasionally here that come up, but they've done very well. You know, I've got a large number of them in the freezer, so we'll be eating asparagus quite a bit here the rest of the summer, fall, and perhaps into the winter. Now here is a real sad song. This is supposed to be my main strawberry bed. I'm going to have to put a fence around it. The deer have found it, and they come in at night and they chew them down to almost nothing. We aren't going to get any berries out of these 2 rows of berries that I planted here. It's really sad. I tried putting some spray on them that's supposed to taste bitter or something so to keep the animals away. It didn't work. So I think the only thing that's going to work is a fence. And here we have 2 rows of raspberries. They're looking a lot better than they have the last few years. I think we're going to get quite a few berries out of it this year. We'll be picking late this month and into July. They're producing quite well. Much better than they have in the last few years. Actually, it looks like we've got some that are turning red right now. So the raspberries are doing much better. Last year I wanted to create a small garden that I could get seeds into really early in the season. Something that I could just dig up without having to bring in my tractor and plow and things like that and get some seeds in. I had radishes and lettuce, spinach. Oh, what else did I have in here? I don't remember what else I had in here. But that's all done with now. And I now have cabbages in here. There's a cabbage. And there's a turnip next to it, so I planted some turnips in here really early. Unfortunately, it's mainly leaves and not much for turnip. But I have 4 cabbage plants, and they're looking like they're doing pretty well. It probably helped that I watered them yesterday. And now we're down by the main vegetable garden. In the front here I have 1 cabbage plant, and next to it a couple of kohlrabi that I was able to grow from seed in my cold frame, and those will be harvested here probably in a week. They're good size, but those can grow quite large without getting woody, so I'm going to let those grow pretty large. Next to it I have more kohlrabi that grew from seed, and there's some turnips in here as well. And on the left is 2 rows of onions, some red and some white. Behind them you can see my later planting of corn. They did not germinate well. I see now though that some of the smaller plants are growing up here, so I watered pretty heavily about 4 or 5 days ago, and maybe that's what it needed to get germinated. In the background is my early planting of corn. It's a real sad song here because it froze and almost half of the plants died as a result of that freezing. Here we have some squash plants. These look like bush plants, butternut, because they're not vining out like they have in the past. Right in front of it here I've got a watermelon that volunteered. Over here we have slicing cucumbers, and I'm going to show you cucumbers that are growing on there shortly. Behind them I have muskmelon, and I've got a number of muskmelon plants scattered around that volunteered. And behind them is watermelon. 3 rows of sugar and peas, and I'll be picking those in a couple days. Next to them are beets and beans. I don't understand the beans. They did not germinate well at all. I replanted again because hardly any of them came up, which is really unusual. And then my tomatoes are a mixed bag here. Those aromas in the background. I think that third one there, the front one there, is a aroma as well. Unfortunately, it froze, and I'm not sure that I got this one covered up really well because the early girl next to this post just is, I don't think we're going to get anything out of it. This is zucchini that I planted from seed, and they have some zucchini growing on them now. And in front of them we have peppers. I planted 3, but only 2 are growing. And next to that we have grape tomatoes, one doing much better than the other. Let's go see about taking a look at those zucchini and cucumbers. Well, there's one zucchini right there that's growing pretty well, and there's other ones on some of the other plants as well. See one curling right there. The cucumbers are hiding underneath the leaves. There they are. And I think both plants here have some on. Yes, there's some growing right down here. These grow pretty long, so they got a ways to go. And these are edible pod peas, and they're just about ready to pick. Yeah, maybe tomorrow I'll pick these. I like them to get big and full because the peas taste better than the pods, and if you get them fuller, you get a better product, I think. So that's it for this edition of the Juneau Garden. I hope you enjoyed it.